see similarities between the cannabis market, I guess, and psychedelics? I mean, I've had people on that are, opening up clinics for ketamine and all sorts of things for PTSD and depression. And this seems like people are really becoming more accepting of psychedelics, almost more so than cannabis in some places.
I, I was there, so it's so exciting that I got to witness it happening.
Hmm.
But cannabis broke down the stigma around people ingesting effects to get through and enjoy their everyday life. I can't speak for you, Rachel, but growing up, the shame around someone who had to take sleeping pills, had to, who took sleeping pills, the shame around someone who had to take a stimulant in order to focus, they would hide those things.
Hmm.
Now there is a pride in the fact that I'm owning my own day as someone runs around with their juggling their vapes, their pills, their this and their that, all the way to their, mushroom tea drink, because that's them taking control of their lives.
Right.
To me, that flip in culture in America, cannabis was front and center. And once cannabis flipped for people, then I think it's easy for all these other categories of, substances that deliver effects to follow suit. And I think it's wonderful that people are looking at mushrooms, versus looking at pharmaceutical drugs. And I think it's wonderful that there are people, whether it's, ketamine clinics done right, or whether it's all the other psychedelics or the legalization movement around psilocybin, all of that is in the same vein, giving people access and an opportunity to ingest products from the earth that, as opposed to harming them, actually have the ability to enhance that individual's existence. And so
Right.
it's just a race as to who's going to own that market. And then that will determine, how people experience those products going forward.
Okay, and let's talk about that for a second. For the average person, and we talked about this a little earlier before I started, I want to, can you kind of break down the different types, what they are, how people can take this in a way that really helps them, so they don't have this stigma of, oh yeah, people that are smoking weed are always just lazy people on the couch, or they have to get through life this way because they're too anxious and it just gives them an even keel feel. But when you walk into these dispensaries and you have no idea what you're looking at, you just end up walking right by, or you end up abusing it because you don't know what you're doing. So can you break all that down for me?
I would look at a dispensary like looking at a gym. And so if someone who had never worked out before in their life walked into a gym, fancy, not fancy, Gold's Gym in Venice Beach, it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
And that person walked out and be like, not for me. I grabbed on that bar and pulled really hard and it really hurt this part of my shoulder. And I know I have shoulder issues, so gyms aren't for me. Like, I get it, but I see marijuana as the same thing, right? To break it down to its parts as simple as possible, the plant, the marijuana plant, has a couple hundred compounds that
Hmm.
make up that plant. They're, for the most part, called cannabinoids. Okay, so we know about THC because THC is what Cheech and Chong smoke that make them go ha ha ha. THC is the part that makes you high. Okay, that's one compound. I said there are hundreds, over 200. Um, there are compounds of the 200 that directly correlate with a human's sleep. As opposed to THC, there's a compound called CBN.
Hmm.
That compound, and I can tell you firsthand for myself, but also we can point you to all the clinical research. When that compound is ingested into humans, it helps facilitate um, quality sleep in a way that would blow your mind.
Hmm.
There are 109, or there's 200 more. And what science has done, and it was really Israeli science to start, and now it's the world over, is but it started with Israel. They sequenced the DNA of cannabis, Israel did, and then they started pulling it apart and saying, what does this do? What does that do? What does this do? What does that do? And so you have what people refer to now as this miracle plant. Why is that? Because for so many people, it does so much. I count in my book for, the story that really that changed everything for me, where I flipped when this became my mission versus my opportunity at business. There was this young girl in particular who had an inoperable tumor in her brain. And after exhausting all options available to her mom, one of the most amazing, inspiring humans I've ever met in my life, they were able to access cannabis oil. And after the cannabis oil treatment, she went back to St. Jude's Hospital. And they scanned her brain, and they called the mom and said, "You got to come back. We got to do the scans again. We think there was a problem." The mom brings her back. They scan him again and go, "I don't know what to tell you, but I can't see a tumor."
Wow.
So it wasn't necessarily the THC or the CBN, and I couldn't sit here as a doctor and tell you which of these cannabinoids. And what really is important is it's the combination. They call it the entourage effect, right? And so medicine and science is right now really studying what combinations of these cannabinoids have unlock these miracle outcomes. But the shrinkage of cancerous tumors is something that cannabis does.
Yeah.
And so again, going into the gym, right, and saying, "I hurt my shoulder," and this guy has a six-pack, and that person has low body fat. It's like, yeah, but they're all in there for different reasons, and they're using different machines, and they know how to use them.
Right.
So what I would recommend to people looking at marijuana is look at it as something where here is a plant that has over a couple hundred different ingredients, and when you put them together in different variations, they literally can connect in our bodies in ways that are miraculous. So what are you looking for, right? Well, I'm just looking, when I go home, I don't like to have a drink anymore. I know the calories and the liver damage, and I don't like it. Makes me kind of feel bad in the morning. I don't want to drink 200 calories of Chardonnay anymore. So how do I take the edge off, relax, but still be present and not giggly for the rest of my evening?
Oh,
Okay,
I love that. I want one of those.
that's great, right? And that's a way to look at this plant, and you can certainly achieve that. In the same way, now we know how to achieve, hey, I don't want to be a cannabis user. I don't want to smoke anything, but I don't want pharma to help me sleep. How can cannabis help me? Okay, well, actually, there's some really great companies that make these CBN slips you put under your tongue, or pills. There's even CBN hot tea that you drink as sleepy time tea that's available. Oh my goodness. So I just urge people to look at this miraculous plant as something that is built to connect with the human body. And as we can study and understand what the plant does, we match it with what it is that we're seeking. Go in with a purpose, and this plant will change your life.